Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Errol.
Let me ask you about this immigration situation. You introduced a bill about a little over a week ago, to try to sort of intervene in it, and I just don't understand the intervention. Your bill calls for the U.S. to pay for attorneys for the 50,000 kids who have shown up as unaccompanied minors at the border?
Yeah, so we believe that this is a serious humanitarian crisis. It requires a serious multi-pronged response. Certainly, there's a role for the Department of State to play in terms of interacting with the Central American Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Certainly, there's a role between the United States and Mexico to deal with the border that exists between Mexico and Guatemala, less than 200 miles, as compared to the border between Mexico and the United States, more than 2,000 miles. It's a lot easier to police that border with Guatemala and Mexico and to deal with the problem on the 35-yard line and not on the 5-yard line where it's closer to go. But amongst the multiplicity of things that we think need to happen, many of those unaccompanied children will not have a valid legal basis to remain, but some will, under current U.S. law, whether that's asylum, whether that's something called U visas that are available to certain juveniles who've been victimized of highly violent crime, suffered mental or emotional or physical trauma, and are currently cooperating with a law enforcement investigation. And there's something called special immigrant juvenile status for children who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected by one or both parents. These are things, Errol, that exist under current immigration law. What we're saying is that in the absence of counsel for these unaccompanied children, some who are 6, who are 7, who are 8, it's virtually impossible. It's a fantasy to believe that they can vindicate whatever rights exist under current U.S. law in an immigration proceeding in the absence of counsel.
But under the current law, in the code, it says, you can vindicate those rights at no expense to the government. You can pursue this visa or this special status and so forth. You're proposing that that part, at no expense to the United States, be stricken.
Absolutely. We believe the law should be changed, and we're not the only ones. So we got a lot of support amongst the Democratic caucus in the House. But interestingly enough, Errol, this provision was in the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill passed by the Senate last year. 52 Democrats, 2 independents, 14 Republicans voted for this very provision.
I mean, at some point, do we send the bill back to Guatemala or Mexico?
Well,
I mean,
lawyers
are expensive, as you know.
Lawyers can be expensive, but we actually think that this is a cost-saving measure to the taxpayer for a variety of reasons. One, if you can reduce the amount of time spent in detention that is otherwise uncalled for, which a lawyer can help to determine, you actually save the taxpayers money because detention is very expensive. You can expedite removals when there is no legal basis under law to remain. In that instance, you also save the taxpayers money by conserving judicial resources, which are often spent in an inefficient fashion when there is no counsel. You are saving the taxpayers money. So there's been studies done, one commissioned by the City Bar Association actually, that indicated this could be a net positive if you provide individuals who are unrepresented with counsel in immigration proceedings. We're leaving that debate for another day in terms of everyone, but we certainly believe that it is the right thing to do. And it makes sense for unaccompanied children.
Last question on this, because we got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but aren't you then sort of giving some truth to the false hope that these kids were sent here with? I mean, many of them have been exploited and deceived, right? Charged thousands of dollars and told, if you make it to the border, there's some special program and you're going to get a chance to stay here. If your bill were to pass, some of that, that would be closer to true. That, hey, if you make it to the border, you get a lawyer, which nobody gets.
Right. Well, this is a very complicated situation. First of all, the reason for the mass exodus that is taking place is because of the highly violent environment in these countries to which these children are fleeing. These are 3 of the most violent countries in the world. Honduras, in fact, is the most violent. I believe 95% of the homicides in these 3 countries go unresolved. And so you've got a culture of gang violence, you've got drug activity, you've got sexual abuse, you've got intimidation that is taking place that are driving these children, not just to the United States. It should be noted that other Central American countries, along with Mexico, and including Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Belize, have all experienced exponential increases in the amount of individuals from these 3 Northern Triangle countries seeking asylum. What that means to us, Errol, is that this is not a push or a pull from the United States that is drawing the unaccompanied minors.
I guess
It's largely a push.
I get stuck on these smugglers who are
Yeah.
trying to exploit this situation, right?
They are trying to exploit the situation. There are false narratives.
They're
that
running
they are,
ads in the newspapers down there.
Right. Well, there
running
are
ads in
false
the media.
narratives that they are articulating. And I think Secretary of Homeland Security Johnson is doing the right thing by communicating what is actually the state of the law. But once individuals make it to our border, the question is, consistent with our democracy and judicial system, is it right to have an unaccompanied child in an immigration proceeding and believe that they can execute upon their due process under law? They don't even speak the language in the absence of counsel.
Okay, all right. That's we're gonna have to disagree on that one, but it'll be an interesting debate and to see how far that goes. Let's talk about the looming strike by MTA workers. You, I imagine, because you have some LIRR, this is Long Island Railroad. You have some Long Island Railroad stops in your district. You were part of a group of lawmakers that signed a letter calling for an extension of a required sort of cooling off period. Although the MTA says, look, if they're going to strike, you should do it during the summer when there's sort of less at stake. What's your reading of where we are on this?
Well, generally, we want to avert a strike. A strike could be incredibly problematic for the economy, for the region, not just for the commuters from Nassau and Suffolk County, but for New York City. As you point out, Errol, I represent the Atlantic Avenue train station, which is one of the largest deposit areas for people who are coming in to the city from Long Island and people who are actually going out to Long Island from Brooklyn and from New York City. I think that the two sides need to continue to negotiate to get to a point where they can work it out. And that's been the position that the congressional delegation led by Steve Israel has taken. And I believe that that is a correct position. And hopefully, at some point, if there is an impasse similar to what was done by the governor connected to the MTA, Governor Cuomo can step in, broker a resolution so that we can avert a strike that would be bad for everybody.
I mean, but doesn't it, if it comes closer to Labor Day, it sort of strengthens the hand of those threatening to strike if it's going to affect more people, number one. Number two, you're getting closer to Election Day, which, sort of colors the whole conversation a lot.
Well, those are atmospherics that, I'm certain are being taken into account by a variety of the different stakeholders, though I've got to say, in working and speaking with the representatives for the Long Island Railroad employees, the transit workers, they do not want to strike. They really would like to work out an agreement, understanding that they cannot get everything that they would have liked to have received in a final negotiated contract, but that when you negotiate, the two sides have to give some ground in order to arrive at common ground, which is something that I think will be in the best interest of the people of New York City.
One of the big ticket items on the agenda when you go back to work in Washington tomorrow is the highway bill, which is money for lots of infrastructure projects, lots of roads, lots of bridges. It's not supposed to be wrapped up in politics, and it's supposed to get done during the summer. This is not one of these things where you can pick it up and launch these projects in October. What's your sense of what's going to happen here?
This is another tough one, and this is an unfortunate situation where infrastructure has become highly politicized, where for decades it had not been. Crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels should not be a Democratic issue or Republican issue. This is a classic American issue. But there are many in the Tea Party-led House of Representatives who have politicized the issue and refused to do anything to ensure that we have the capacity to fully fund our nation's transit system in a way that is even inconsistent with what big business in Washington is saying that we should do. The United States Chamber of Commerce, in this instance, sides with President Obama and Democrats in the House and the Senate in saying we have to act. But the Tea Party, once again, is preventing Speaker Boehner from sitting at the negotiating table and arriving at a resolution that makes sense for the American people. We got to hope that when we get back to Washington tomorrow, that we can break the stalemate, but it is going to take effort, and it is going to continue to point out the hypocrisy of the Tea Party-led House of Representatives, which is there to serve the American people, but continues to do things to undermine the interests of the American people.
Is Boehner still adhering to the so-called Hastert rule, that he's got to have a majority of his conference before he'll move forward on legislation? Because if Democrats feel as you do, you could go to him and sort of cut a deal and say, look, we'll give you 100+ votes, bring it to the floor, and we'll help you over the hump.
Well, in several instances during the 113th Congress, Speaker Boehner has actually violated the Hastert rule in the best interest of the American people when duty called. So he did it with the Superstorm Sandy bill, after significant pressure was brought to bear by Democrats and Republicans from the Northeast. The Violence Against Women's Act reauthorization, only a fraction of House Republicans voted for it, but we were able to get it passed February of 2013. We did it with the debt ceiling. We did it when we ended the government shutdown. This is another instance where I think politics should be put aside so we can do what's right for the American people.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now. You've got a train to catch tomorrow or whenever you're going back to Washington.
I head down tomorrow.
Okay, thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks, Errol.